Today we have a very special video lined up for you as we've come all the way out to the Nurburgring to upgrade the suspension on this Vulcan Alpha equipped BMW G82 M4 here at Misha's workshop.
So the front axle of course has additional grip, but the back is something else. It's, I would say, do I dare to say it? I think I dare to say it.
This car has already been developed to an extremely high level as it is already equipped with quite a lot of things that make it very fast out the box. So we're really excited to be working on this today, so just to get that extra little bit out with our suspension upgrades and to make it even faster out here on track. The car has a lot of lightweight body panels on it, carbon Kevlar and carbon fibre all around the car, and it's actually about 300 kilos lighter than stock at about 1,500 kilos curb weight, which is extremely low for a G82 M4 that has a full welding cage inside as well. That usually adds weight to the car, so to have a car that's overall lighter with the safety features included is a real achievement. We've seen body panels very similar to this over on the BMW G82 M4 GT4 race cars that we worked with in the British GT last year. So very similar makeup on the panels there to get the car body weight down, as we know it is an issue of the GX series in general. They're a very heavy M car. However, the real standout upgrades that you can see are the Aero additions that Vulcan Alpha have provided for this build. That's a front splitter, front canards, and a rear wing, which we'll touch on more in a second. This overall package actually gives around 200 kilograms of downforce, which is a huge amount. So you consider you've lost 300 kilos of mass, you then put in 200 kilos of downforce back in, but with a lighter car that can move faster on acceleration, but it gains from all that grip from the tyre, from the normal force provided by the Aero. So you get in a real balance that can achieve much, much better lap times. Often when you install big Aero packages that give 200 kilos of downforce, that's a huge amount of downforce. Often when you're achieving that level of downforce, there's a lot of drag to contend with as well. So Aero isn't always win-win-win. There's often moments where you can actually have quite a few drawbacks, such as the drag that is supplied, because to give the downforce, it's physically pushing down on the car and it provides a backwards drag force that you've got to overcome to accelerate through. So the faster you go with the more downforce provided, the harder it becomes to accelerate through that. Here at the Nurburgring, that can pose as an issue because there's a lot of very high speed, fast straights. So if you've got a huge amount of downforce to get the car as fast as possible through the corners, you're going to be actually impacted on the straights because you won't be able to accelerate and get up to the top speeds that you otherwise would if you didn't have that Aero package on. And that's where this kit gets really special, because just like in Formula 1 or even on the new GT3 RS 992s, this rear wing is equipped with DRS. That is the system that when you press a button on the steering wheel, two solenoids activate and it opens up the rear wing. This reduces the downforce, but opens the wing up to allow air straight through to reduce the drag on the car. So this means in a scenario such as a high-speed straight, where you don't need a lot of downforce, you don't want a lot of downforce, you can effectively get rid of it, so you can get the acceleration and get the top speed, and then when you're approaching the corner, you can just close the DRS again, have all the downforce applied back to the chassis, and have enough grip at the tyre to get back through that corner. So it's a real win-win system where you can have all the downforce through the corners to get your speed well up through the corner, and then on the straights, you just open up your wing, bleed off that Aero, reduce your drag, and maintain your speeds. So as an overall package, this is a real machine to achieve very, very fast lap times here. This car does already have some suspension upgrades fitted though, courtesy of 24/7 Performance here at the Nurburgring. They supplied and fitted the Moton 3-way coilovers and a few other goodies to the car as well. So the Moton 3-way coilovers, as well as being 3-way adjustable, which we will touch on at the setup stage of this build, they also have camber adjustable top mounts as part of the assembly. So on the front shocks, they come with a plate on the top that allows for camber adjustment out of the box. So that means that we can adjust the camber on the front axle, which you otherwise cannot do as standard on a G8X M car. We make our camber plates for this, but if the coilover already has a top mount, then you don't need those. You can just install the coilover itself and use that camber adjustment, which makes a huge difference on the front end of these cars. Let's get started with the upgrades that we're going to be fitting today on this M4 to get even more potential out of an already incredible car. The first thing we're going to be fitting at the front axle is our offset solid control arm bush. So this mounts in the front load control arm, the arm that mounts at the bottom of the assembly and goes forward to the front. As standard, this arm has a big rubber bush fitted, which under really heavy braking compresses and moves around. So what this gives is instability in the chassis. It can give a little bit of wiggle in the steering wheel as we're under really heavy braking. And more importantly, as we go into the initial turn-in, these bushes flex and they can actually cause geometry changes in camber and toe as it just starts moving around. And the grippier the tyres start putting into the car, the more deflection that actually occurs in this bush. So we're going to be fitting our solid bush. When this is fitted, there will be no deflection from that arm. So once that's in there, under really heavy braking, the arm's going to stay exactly where it is and it's just going to go straight into the chassis. So the force is going to go into the tyre as the brakes are hit, through the arm and into the chassis and stopping the car. Before that, what will happen is the force would go into the tyre, through the arm, it would then move the rubber bush and then the chassis would stop after the chassis had stopped flexing on the bush. Whereas with these fitted, it's much more immediate and the stopping is much more impactful. So as soon as you hit the brakes, the car stops. There's no waiting, there's no moving around. So it feels a lot more stable and controllable when you're out on track pushing really hard. But these solid bushes aren't any ordinary solid bush. They are our fixed offset caster bush. This means that we have an offset bearing machined into the housing that when pressed into the arm in an exact position, gives an increase in caster at the front axle. Why we're really interested in getting more caster, and this is something we picked up as well working with the GT4 teams last year, caster is a real recipe to getting as much out of this chassis as possible. So the more caster we can package in here, the better. The reason we want this caster is not only does it improve steering weight, feel and feedback, so the steering wheel becomes a bit firmer and more stable and it wants to stay more straight due to an increase in mechanical trail. That's really handy around the Nurburgring for really high speed sections, having that stability in the front axle rather than it wanting to wander around. But where we're really interested in the caster and why it works on any circuit of any speed in any corner is that it gives dynamic camber gain, which we've mentioned quite a few times before in different videos, but as a quick recap, what that effectively means is the more caster you have at the front axle, as you're turning the steering wheel, it gains negative camber on the outside wheel, which is what we want. So this means that we can run less negative camber statically in a straight line, so we get better braking traction because we've physically got more tyre in contact with the ground. And then through the corner, that really starts to lean over, so we can lean onto the contact patch through the corner and gain the camber we need to get the grip out of the car through the corner. So it's a real win-win technique, is putting the caster into the system so we get better braking traction and more mid-corner grip as well. Moving to the rear of the car, we've made quite a lot of changes at the back axle. Our kinematics kit mainly contains parts for the rear axle, as there's a lot of work at the back of the BMW to get as much grip and traction as possible. So starting at the top, we fitted our two rear upper camber arms. So these offer even more camber adjustment than we can get as standard. As standard, there is two eccentric bolts, one for camber and one for toe, but they are very limited in terms of their range. So when we're setting up a car as aggressive as this, we want to get a lot more adjustment into the back axle so we're not limited by the stock adjustment points. In fact, we actually remove those eccentric bolts entirely and we install our lockout kit. So this is two plates and a bolt that effectively removes that adjustment completely and locks it out. So all the adjustment is then done with the adjustable length of our control arms. Our arms also contain rose joints. So this is the rose joints at each end of the arm. Whereas standard, the arms contain a rubber bush at one end. So these bushes, when they're out on track, can flex around and move, and they can cause camber and toe changes as the tyre is being loaded through the corner. This effect only gets worse as we increase grip with better suspension, with better tyres, and with more aero. This car has all of that. So it's got so much force going through the tyre, it causes even more deflection through the arm, which changes the camber and the toe settings, which can lead to an instability out on track. With our arms installed, they're rose jointed on every single arm now. So all of those forces go directly through the arms straight into the chassis to have that effect over the car. So not only do we prevent the deflection in the actual wheel, what we're also doing is we're increasing the response time from the tyre input into the chassis. So whereas before, the car would go through the corner, the tyre would load, the arm would compress, and then the chassis would change direction. Whereas now, we go into the corner, the tyre deflects, and immediately after that, the force is put straight through the arm into the chassis with no deflection. So you get a much more responsive car, which is much nicer as a driver, especially on track when you really want those inputs to be felt at every single corner. We also have fitted our rear traction arms. So these mount at the lower end of the suspension assembly going forwards. And these are a really nice bit of kit to install. So what we do is we fit those to the car, again removing a rubber bush for deflection, but more importantly what we're doing at the back is we're actually altering the kinematics of the rear axle. And this is where it gets really interesting. So with the rear traction arm, it effectively has an arc pattern every time the tyre and wheel assembly goes into compression. So as this whole assembly is moving up into the wheel arch, there's an arc pattern being created by that arm as it's a point-to-point arm. So what we can do by altering the length of that traction arm, we can alter the arc pattern, which means as we go on the throttle and the back goes into compression, we can adjust the length of the arm in such a way that very slightly rotates the hub forward. This means that every time we're coming out the corner, we get back on the gas, therefore the rear goes into slight squat. What we're actually doing by way of that is we're rocking the hub and therefore the leading edge of the tyre into the ground. We're actually applying a downward and forward force on the tyre into the tarmac. So this gives so much more corner exit traction, so you can get back on the gas way more aggressively on corner exit, and it just hooks up, digs in, and you're off down the straight. So a really nice trick bit of kit just to alter that geometry at the rear axle in a dynamic way, which is quite cool. Finally at the back, we have also got our toe arms and rear solid bushes. So toe arms, again, they increase that range of adjustment we were talking about before. So as standard with the eccentric bolts, we have to pick and choose camber and toe settings that work with each other, whereas when we fit adjustable arms entirely at the rear axle, it is completely up to us where we set those values. We can run anything, like we could run -4 degrees at the rear if we wanted to. We're not going to go that high because that would be borderline dangerous on this car, but we're going to go to high 2s, 3s on the rear axle in camber, and therefore when we set that, the toe arm is adjustable in length to such an extent we can set the exact toe settings we're looking for with no limitations to worry about whatsoever. We've also again removed a rubber bush in that arm, again for those deflection reasons we were talking about. The rear solid control arm bush mounts where the coffin arm at the bottom meets the subframe, and this bush, again as standard, is a big rubber bush in the subframe, so we've replaced that with a solid monoboard bush from our kit, which again is purely for deflection reasons, just keep that rear axle far more stable and consistent, so when we're going through high speed and low speed corners, there's still no deflection, therefore no change in geometry like we would be getting with the standard rubber bushes. So that's all installed at the rear axle now, so we've got all the kit fully installed to the car. Now it's time to get this down on the ground and get a full setup on the car. With all of the parts installed, it's now time to give the car a full suspension setup. With 200 kilos of extra downforce due to the Vulcan Alpha Aero kit, we're expecting a lot more grip out of that tyre, therefore much higher cornering speeds. This means we're going to be pulling a lot more G through the corner, so we're going to be actually physically leaning that chassis over even more, which requires even more camber than we'd normally set on this car. So we're going to get more camber front and rear to account for that additional grip, to give it more contact patch to lean onto and overall more grip through the corner. So it's going to be a lot faster with the aero and the suspension changes. We're expecting much higher cornering speeds. Again, with the traction arms at the rear, corner exit traction should also be on the up, and with so many corners here at the Nurburgring, corner exit traction matters an awful lot because it's going to affect the end of straight speeds if we're getting out of the corner faster and more aggressively as well, and in a more controlled manner. This car is also fitted with 3-way Moton coilovers. So that means that we can actually set the high-speed compression adjustment quite soft, and this means that we can run curbs and we can hit compressions and bumps in the actual tarmac, and it can absorb them like a soft car. So it's not going to actually unsettle the car mid-corner when we're riding a curb. We can keep nice and on the gas and just ride the curb and keep the grip, because it's not going to be bouncing the contact patch aggressively off the ground. It's going to be absorbing it using the high speed. We can then set the low speed compression and rebound adjustment to control the car through the corner and get the front to rear distribution of grip that we're looking for. So we're actually going to set the rear a little softer on compression and the front a little harder, and that's to help get them rear tyres the grip they're looking for through the corner on corner entry and on corner exit when the dampers are most effective. That's where we're looking to get the transition of mass really nice and comfortable in a really transient way. The front end, we're going to probably be picking up an inside front, for example, so we're less concerned about that transfer of mass on the front axle, whereas the rear is where a lot of the focus goes into on the damping for this car. With all the setup changes made, we need to get this car out on track in the hands of Misha, and we're going to see what he thinks of the setup.
Woo, baby! Just done the first couple of laps, and that's freaking insane. So the front axle, of course, has additional grip, but the back is something else. It's, I would say, do I dare to say it? I think I dare to say it. It's grippier than our GT4 race car on the back axle, especially with the low speed corners. When you do the transition quick from left to right, it just sets on one wheel when you go on acceleration. I think you can do like really one wheel motion with this car. with additional hops on the Nurburgring that you have. It's really crazy. The amount of grip, even though it's just a rear-wheel driven car, right now, crazy enough, the limiting factor is the tire. Nankang CRS, it's already extremely grippy. This car, we need to have full slicks because we have more aero than GT4 race car. So it's close to a GT3, just minus the underfloor. Equal amount of weight. I would say close to or even more power. And a lot of grip. And even without traction control, because race car we drive with traction control. Pussies. Just on stage 2. And this is without. Phenomenal grip and handling and feedback, especially the feedback through the front axle and also rear. Amazing. I'm super happy. I cannot wait to do more with this car, more laps, more fine tuning. It's a proper beast. But for me, the most important thing is that Anton, the owner, is happy with his new baby after everything we went through.
To see the full on boards, check out Misha's videos over on his channel. You can find out more about the upgrades we discussed in this description below as well. And if you haven't already, make sure you subscribe to the channel as you don't want to miss the next video, as we've set ourselves a challenge of unlocking even more performance out of Misha's 992 GC3.